Hello everyone and welcome to the beginning of Unit 8. So we'll start off by looking back, but I want to say something. This is Unit 8. There's only 10 units. We're almost done. So this week, 2 more weeks after that of new material, and then we're heading on to a couple of contemporary issues type things, not in MindTap, and then the final exam. So almost done. It's hard to believe it. This class got off to such a rough start, but here we are. We're almost there. All right, so I asked a question, well, I knew the answer to the question, and I was trying to figure out and get your viewpoints, because your viewpoints are very, very important. And it's an ethical question, and a lot of you guys, you've asked multiple times questions about my police work, and I bring it up a lot. But it's a question about ethics, and if someone's breaking a law, but society's like, we're really okay with that, and the officer arrests somebody, whose fault is it? And like, here's a question, and here's an example of this. Multiple states have now made state laws saying that it's legal to own and possess and use marijuana. Still against federal law. So a federal law enforcement officer could arrest you in one of these states for possessing marijuana where it's legal in the state. You're in the state, but it's a state officer wouldn't arrest you, but a federal officer could. And then there are a number of examples out there of how society changes and laws change. And most people, there was a mix of, as the person was arrested, it's the police officer's fault. Wait, hold on. I'm not going to go find the police officer's fault. Somebody said, bring it up in court. But one person got to the crux of this. It's not the officer's fault. They're just doing what they're told to do by law, and I'll come back to that. The person arrested probably shouldn't knowingly break a law. Sometimes we unknowingly break a law. It should be approached in a lawmaking setting. All right. So that's the reality of this. While police officers have leeway in some things about what they can do, what they can charge, what they arrest for, there are a number of laws out there, and much of the law, the way the law is written, it says the officer shall do something, usually arrest or follow up or charge or whatever, which means the officer doesn't have any leeway. The politicians, your state legislature or Congress, on a national level, they're the ones who made the laws. Law enforcement is there to enforce the laws, not to pick out which ones they want to enforce, not to enforce them as they see fit. They're there to enforce the law. And this is where it gets, kind of interesting ethically sometimes, because people say, well, you shouldn't be doing this. This is wrong. And the officer's like, this is the law. Heck, I might even agree with you, but this is the law, and I have no choice but to follow it. So it's just an interesting ethical quandary. I think too often the officers get blamed, the person who gets arrested gets blamed, but very rarely do the lawmakers, the people who actually wrote the law, get blamed. And rarely do laws change, or they change very, very slowly, like glacially. So just something to think about. So let's take a look at some of the other materials from last week. So the next question was about agents and principals, and I think you guys got there, that everyone seemed to have a good grasp on that. The next question was about Title VII, and yeah, most of you, I think everyone actually, kind of got the point of Title VII. It'll protect you from discrimination, hopefully protect your job if you're pregnant. There are some... So, yes, it protects your job while you're pregnant and for a period of post-pregnancy, but some people have tried to stretch the definition of this and say, look, I need to stay home and take care of my kids for the first 2 years, so I need you to hold my job for 2 years. The law doesn't protect that. The law, there are limits to the law. So, but the law basically makes sure that you're not going to be discriminated based on race, religion, sex, gender, sexual orientation, a number of things. And the list in my lifetime, especially in the last 10 or 15 years, has grown tremendously. I'm in my 40s now. I hate to admit that. But this law has been expanded tremendously since I began, and it's often hard for me to remember all of the different things. I just go, don't discriminate against people for things that they can't change about themselves. That's how I, go by. That's my moral compass. And then, I'm not going to get myself in trouble. All right, so let's move on. So a couple of things here from the next set of questions. Why are not all sexual harassment, or why are not? Whoa. Yeah, why are not, well, it doesn't sound right when I say it. All right. So some sexual harassment cases aren't taken seriously. Why is that? I think well, for a long time, sexual harassment wasn't necessarily seen in the same light it is today. So you'll see people who say that's not a big thing. I have been around people who are sexually harassing people and don't think their behavior is inappropriate. So they don't realize it's inappropriate. It's absolutely inappropriate, but they don't realize it. So they may not take a complaint seriously because they don't understand what the complaint's really about. I think most places now take sexual harassment very seriously just because of how society's changed, how much spotlight it gets in the media, in the news, in things in general. So I think it's being taken more and more seriously. And somewhere around there, someone says, "Will places try to hide it?" Yeah, they'll try to. A company doesn't want to be known as a place where sexual harassment is allowed. So sometimes they will try to get the parties to agree to something and then never talk about it again because they just don't want the publicity and press about it. Which, if it ends and all the parties are happy with the outcome, then I guess that's great. But it then looks like sometimes things got swept under the rug, which can make things worse. So, yeah, it should always be taken seriously. Can you further describe prima facie? Yeah. First glance, kind of, first look. If I look at what you give me, this looks like it is true. And then you got to prove otherwise. That's the simplest way to do it. Let's see here. So how often do legal matters get involved with sexual harassments, or is it a company thing? Well, so this depends. It depends on the level of what's going on. Sexual harassment is not necessarily criminally illegal. You can't go to jail for telling someone they have a nice backside, but you can get fired for it. If you slap somebody on the backside, that's assault. In North Carolina, it's defined as one of the types of sexual assault. So law enforcement wouldn't get involved in that. So it depends on the level of what's happening, the level of what's going on, determine if it's a crime, which is what law enforcement does, or if it's civil, which is where your company and other courts might get involved. So this is a good question, and one that I kind of highlighted earlier. When does it become illegal? You can't discriminate for things that people can't change about themselves. Right? Like I could go become a pilot, and then you hire me as a pilot. So it's characteristics that you're kind of let's say you're born with, things that you're born with. That is what you can't discriminate against, if that makes sense. Is Title IX related to this? Yes, it applies differently, and Title IX is specific towards certain entities. Title VII is more wide ranging. They're very similar in nature, though. Why is there not one standard of discrimination held to everyone? Great question. There should be. It's difficult. And even if you have one standard, how it's going to be applied in different situations, because if there's different people, different personalities, one tiny little thing is different, that can impact how people perceived it's being applied. So it should be. We should strive to do our best to do that. Is it always possible? No. I wish it was. And is it always, even if you were doing it perfectly, would it always be perceived as being done fairly? And that the answer there is no as well. So it's just a difficult spot. So this is a great question here about how universities are treating men and women differently. And at the NCAA men's and women's basketball tournament, there was a big brouhaha about the weight room, between the difference between the men's and the women's facilities. So yeah, they should be treated equally. Why are they not? I don't know. Well, part of it is that men's sports traditionally bring in more money than women's. So what places will do is say, oh, well, this was paid for by donors, not by the university. And things get a little ugly there. Does Title IX apply to this? No. Does Title VII apply to this? No. Title IX does. And that's where Title VII and Title IX kind of differ. It's where they're applied. Which court has the authority to apply Title VII? All of them. In today's, would it be inappropriate to ask out a co-worker? Depends on where you work. Some companies say you cannot have relationships with coworkers. I've worked at those companies. Other places say it's fine. You can ask them out once. If they say no, you got to move on. You can't ask them 100 times. You can't ask them 2, 3 times. It becomes harassment. But it just depends on the policies of your company, and they're really important to understand. So here's a question about Title IX. So Title IX can be applied differently, and there are some ratios and some other things that apply differently depending on the circumstances. So if you're really interested in that, you're going to have to do some research. I don't know all the details about men's and women's sports as it relates to Title IX, although I do know there are differences based on the type of sports that are offered, which can make things very, very confusing. Should there be a law to prevent a boss from being in trouble when asking a coworker on a date in a good manner? I'm not going to answer that. That's society's answer. I mean, personally, I think anytime you have someone in a position of power over someone else, it makes that relationship difficult. So I would never ask someone who worked for me out on a date. Have there been circumstances where there have been people who work for me that I would have loved to ask on a date? Sure, but it's not going to happen. It's not worth getting in trouble. What's the saying, like, you don't go to the bathroom where you eat or something like that? You don't want, if things go bad at work, that goes bad. Like, so personally, I wouldn't, be romantically involved, with anyone where I worked. All right. This is a great question. As an international student, this is socially acceptable to greet with a kiss on the cheeks. In the U.S., you forget that's your culture, right? Can you get in trouble if this happens inside the workplace? Yeah. Yeah. It's when in Rome, do as the Romans do. It's the same thing when you go to another country. You have to understand the rules and laws. It's been, I think, about 15 or 20 years. A couple of kids went to kids. I'm not going to say kids. I think they were 18, 19 at the time. They were your age. Went to Singapore and were caught chewing gum. And it's illegal in Singapore. And at the time, the law said that you got caned. And they took a big stick, I guess it was a sugar cane or a cane of some kind, and smacked him on the back like 20 times or something as punishment. It's the law there. So you have to understand the laws wherever you are. You have to understand the culture wherever you are, which is difficult. Trust me, living all over the world, I sometimes, something's appropriate one place and not in another. Can you be fired for being transgender in the workplace? So, great question. The answer is right now, I don't know. There are multiple court cases going through the courts. In the end, I think the answer will be no. But right now, it's not clear until the courts finally it proceeds all the way, and there's a full legal tort about that. All right. Is it easy to plea for unintentional discrimination to make a plea? Well, so you're not going to plea because it's not criminally illegal, but can you work out a deal? Probably. If society changes, why would someone even care about it in the first place? Since they're not breaking any laws, the community has no problems. Well, here's the problem. Society changed and people do have a problem with it now. Like, are they going to go back and say get my dad on sexual harassment? No, because my mom's been, she passed away 21 years ago. So it's done with. It's just you have to understand how the societal views at the time that you're doing stuff, right? And this is where things get complicated as well. It's difficult to look back at society through today's prism. You have to look at society through the prism of the time. When people ask, well, why did they do that? Well, people didn't believe it was wrong, and so it's hard to judge people for things that you may believe are wrong now that they didn't believe were wrong at the time. Now, are there still things that are wrong? Absolutely. And I'm not saying that everyone should be forgiven for their sins, in the past, the things that they did that were wrong and evil. What I'm just saying is you have to always look at things through the viewpoint of the time, to understand them. Maybe not to think they were right or wrong, but to understand them. So, society has changed. What my dad and mom did now would be looked down upon. My dad would get fired. But that's society now. That's the world we live in. And you guys make society. So, if you like something, great, keep it that way. If you think society needs a change society. You can do that. People can do that. All right. So yeah, that's all I'm going to talk about in this intro video because there's a lot there. If you have other questions or I didn't answer your questions, please let me know. And let's move on to the next few chapters. I'm going to try to make it short because there's a lot of chapters this week. And as you guys know, I like to talk about stuff. So anyway, have a great day. Let me know if you have any questions.